Oh, here comes Winston. Okay. All right. Well, I think I'm going to maybe start, despite the fact that, you know, the 200 people who bought advance purchase tickets aren't here yet. But I'm really happy to see some people from agriculture and what other school, and the baboon people from Puerto Rico and herpetologists. That's, you know, great. So thank you all for coming. I noticed there are not many lawyers in the room, couple, because you didn't think this was going to have anything to do with the law, right? Even though, as you know, U.S. News and World Report just has listed the WVU College of Law as the place to go to for baboon studies. You know, no, but actually, I was hoping Gordon was here because this was a little bit of a joke about him. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Actually, there is, I was going to say, and I still will, there is a long and noble tradition of lawyers and jurists talking about primates, which I'm sure you all don't know, right? But, as you'll see, FELIX FRANKFURTER on orangutans at Yale in 1961, Scalia on gorillas at Cornell in 92, it's just the beginning. David Souter on chimpanzees at Harvard in 2007, and Gordon Gee on vervet monkeys at Columbia Law School in 2013, and then leading all the way to me. Does it show up? Yeah, okay, good. Anyway, okay, that was my joke, and now I'll be serious. I really do appreciate you coming a lot. This book is called Because They Needed Me, and it's really not my story. It's really the story of this remarkable person, Rita Miljo, who, though she didn't like humans very much, loved animals and devoted her life to them. And just to start off the story actually starts in the winter of 2007. I was just telling some of the folks here that when I was a kid, I only knew there were three professions that existed, which were doctor, lawyer, and pharmacist. Never in my wildest dream did I realize a person could make a living studying baboons or primates. And if I had known, I wouldn't be here. I would be out in Sumatra. But anyway, so I tried to make up for that late in life by becoming sort of addicted to primates. I followed some of them around various places in the world, like Bali and Guatemala and other places. And also started getting addicted to watching nature programs. I read everything I could find about all the primates. And one of the things I always tell my wife, the great thing about growing old, you know, people always worry about what they're going to do in retirement, but I think if you just put me in a rest home and show all the reruns of Animal Planet and Nature, I'll be quite happy. So in 2007, I was watching, I hope I can do this.
Dawn breaks along the Olifants River in South Africa's Limpopo province. Here, at the edge of the wild savanna, a new day begins for a fragile young animal and his surrogate mother. Stu, a 9-week-old orphan baboon, and his human caregiver, Maria Corrales, are on their way to kindergarten at CARE, the Center for Animal Rehabilitation and Education, a unique sanctuary where orphan baby baboons get a second chance in life.
Can you see it?
Stu is my baby. He is about 9 weeks old. I've had him for 8 weeks. He came here as an orphan, as most of the baboons here do. And when they come here this young, they need a mother. So I've been his mother. I carry him with me 24 hours a day, sleep with him at night, and he's my son.
Like the hundreds of other rescues who...
Stop it for a second. that's the beginning of what was an hour-long Animal Planet called Growing Up Baboon. But in addition to being sort of obsessed with primates, I have another psychological problem, which is, you know, you all know what a pedophile is, right? Well, I'm sure you don't know what a gerontophile is, right? Anybody know what a gerontophile is? You know? Someone who's attracted to old women and old men, right? And I'm a you know, there's a saying that most men are looking for mothers, which is true. You can check with my wife, she'll tell you it's true. But I'm looking for a grandmother. So actually, when I started watching Growing Up Baboon, I hope I'm going to be in the right place. Oops, uh-oh. I think I'm already screwing this up.
No botanical garden.
Roadrunner High Speed Online has helped our kids get
Well,
smarter, faster.
If you want a kid to get on.
Anyway, I watched this, this documentary, and I had been looking for a place. Those of you who are interested in this, you probably know that when you volunteer to go to these primate places, which have chimpanzees or orangutans or bonobos or gorillas, generally, all you get to do is sort of throw bananas into the cage or, you know, clean out the shit and that kind of thing. And there are very few places where you actually get to touch the animals. And I wanted to touch the animals. So I got on the phone, and I will tell you, you know, about the old women I fell in love with in a second. But I got on the phone, and I called this woman, Rita Miljo, who I will eventually be able to show you some footage of, I hope. You'll help me if I get stuck, right? Yeah, okay. And I called her up and I said, could I come? You know, and she said, sure. And so the next thing I knew, or almost the next thing, in May of 2007, I got on a plane, little plane, actually in Marseille, which then led to a little plane in Johannesburg, which took me to a town called Phalaborwa in northern Limpopo province near the Mozambique border, where, and you can see it here, I think, is there a pointer? I don't know, does this have a pointer? Oh, uh-oh. Oh, where's the pointer? Top button. Well, anyway, I can't, you'll have to come down eventually. This is Limpopo province, which is, as you say, far north in South Africa, near Kruger National Park, a well-known place where you can see the Big Eight, so-called, and on the border to Mozambique. And I was picked up at the airport in Phalaborwa by Rita Miljo's assistant, whose name I just went blank about. But anyway, we will see, oh, Lee Decker. She picked me up at the airport, and we drove into Phalaborwa to do some shopping. And then we drove out into the bush, into this enormous, unpaved, rock-strewn road that just was unbelievable, as Donald Trump would say, was unbelievable. As we drove along the Oliphant River, which is, I think, in the next slide, that's the Oliphant River, we came to a burial site with a cross on it, and Lee looked at me and said, don't go swimming in the river. We don't want to put one of these up for you. That was the neighbor who had had one beer too many and had gone swimming in the Oliphant and was eaten by a crocodile. So that's when it started. Then we drove on a ways. Oh, you see here some more law, two Chief Justices, Chief Justice Roberts and the alpha male in the baboon troop. We drove on, and we got to this sign that said, welcome to care. And suddenly, we had gone shopping, and so there was food in the back of the truck. There were baboons everywhere. Baboons literally everywhere. There were big ones, little ones. And they jumped up on the truck and started stealing the fruit and vegetables as quickly as they could. And then we finally got the car put away. This is Rita Miljo, the woman I fell in love with. she's been known as the Jane Goodall of baboons. As some of you know, you primate people know, Jane Goodall was the chimpanzee person. Diane Fossey worked with gorillas. Baruti Guldakas, a woman, worked with orangutans. And nobody liked baboons because, as you know, baboons have a terrible reputation. We even call people stupid baboons. And baboons have mainly been shot by farmers as a way of protecting their crops. And they're tremendous pests in South Africa and elsewhere. They can get into anything. They're unbelievably smart. So we got to care, and so where's this pointer? We got to care, and Lee showed me to my room, which I really just marked. Oh, you just push on that thing? Yep. Oh, I see. Oh, okay, so we got to my room here. Lee, and this looks pretty classy, and it actually is the nicest group of volunteers. But I think because I was closer to the geriatric end of life, they gave me a nice room, and it was fairly next to Rita's house. So it looked pretty good when I got in there, although there was a mosquito nest. And Lee said to me, well, here's your room. I hope you like creepy, crawly things. And so she left me, and she said, come next door when you're done. And I went to this dresser right here to put my things in. And I opened the drawer, and about 300 of the hugest cockroaches I had ever seen came pouring out of this thing. And so I was already quite freaked out. And then I went here. To the right here was a painting. And I'm a little pale and compulsive, so the painting was crooked. And I wanted it to be straight, so I went to hang it straight. And about 30 different species of spiders came running out the side of the painting. This was in addition to the fact that in front of my room was a huge family of warthogs. I don't know if you've ever seen warthogs, but they're not cute like pigs. They have these enormous teeth and jaws. I don't think I have a warthog picture. And along the road had been elephants, and Lee also told me that 3 days before, a neighbor had been killed by an elephant. So here I am, a boy from the ghetto of New York, with these creepy crawly things, and there are baboons everywhere. And then I went to see Rita, whose room this was. Let me see what's next here. Oh, okay, well, I'll get to this in a second. So Rita, I had discovered from watching the program, I could tell had a German accent, so I knew she was German-born. And I spoke German a little to her as a way of trying to charm her into letting me come when I called. But what I didn't know about her was that she was born in 1931 in a town called Königsberg near the Prussian border. What I didn't know about her was that at the age of 9, she had become the youngest province leader of the Hitler Youth in Germany. Now, this is a boy who grew up in a Holocaust refugee family. So we had a lot to talk about, and we became immediate friends. She took me down for a walk, told me all the animals who could kill me, among which there's a herpetologist, so you know what a black mamba is, right? A black mamba is probably, I think, the most lethal snake there is. I think if you've been bitten by a black mamba, you have about 20 minutes. And there are quite a lot of them, and pythons, and other poisonous snakes around. But anyway, I wanted to go back, since I'm an immigration teacher in my day job, I wanted to talk about undocumented aliens. And this is Bobby, who is an undocumented alien and who started care with Rita. And this is a kind of a quote from what I wrote. While Rita was traveling in northern Namibia in 1980, she came upon this neglected female baboon named Bobby. Bobby is also the South Afrikaans name for baboon, which means pest, actually. And he was being kept in a military encampment as a mascot and was all messed up. And so Rita, without the appropriate documents, smuggled him over the border into South Africa. And this was 1980. The other thing about Rita, she was a really incredible person. She had also always loved animals. She had volunteered at the Hamburg Zoo in Germany, and she had married a German engineer named Lothar. His last name was not Miljo, that was her second husband. And he got a job in South Africa working for a mining company, and not because she loved Lothar so much, but because it was a chance to be with animals. She went with him to South Africa. And when they got to South Africa, they both took, she was a very independent woman, so she learned to fly small planes, and she became a stunt pilot. And he became a stunt pilot too, to sort of catch up with her. But she was the better stunt pilot. And they had a child, and unfortunately in 1972, he and their daughter crashed the small plane and died. This was in 1972. And it was in 1980 that she met Bobby. And you can see that just like in America, where we put undocumented immigrants in custody, Bobby too had a cage. Bobby's in there. He's not very easy to see, but he's in there. There he is. That's his face. Her face. Sorry. This was Rita and the man, Bernard, who she started care with, a native South African. And I'll get into Rita's relationship with South Africans in a couple of minutes. Anyway, this is the entrance to care, and Rita. Care is essentially staffed by volunteers. There are a couple of people who work there, very few, and a couple of native South Africans who do grounds work. But there was Rita and the person who's now the head of care, Stephen, over here, and these are all volunteers. And you can see, I don't know if you can read it, but this was one of Rita's famous saying, because people said, well, baboons aren't in trouble, other species are in trouble. And she said, must we wait until a species is on the brink of extinction before we wake up? So her idea, and when I asked her in an interview, I said, why baboons? Her answer was, which is the title of the book, because they needed me. You know, she said the cute animals didn't need her, the baboons needed her. So just quickly to give you some baboon education, there are essentially 6 species of baboons. Not all of them live in South Africa. They live throughout Africa. But the one that lived in this region and that Rita was devoted, how did I get there? Oh, yeah, okay. The one Rita was devoted to were the Chakma baboons. And that's, they're indigenous to that area of South Africa. And so what Rita did at CARE basically was she found orphan baboons whose mothers had been shot by farmers or who had died through other predators or other forms of violence, traps, so on. And she took them in, and she essentially invented a new way of raising baboons, which is baboons live in troops, which are matrilineal, essentially. There is an alpha male, but the hierarchy really depends on matriarchal succession. So the closer you're related to the dominant female, the more status you have. And there's been a very interesting book by 2 University of Chicago people, I don't know if you guys know it, called Baboon Metaphysics, which talks about the socialization of baboons and how friendships are important in baboon society. Anyway, what Rita did was she did 2 kinds of amazing things. One is that she created artificial troops. She would get up to 30 baboons. Baboons live in troops of up to 100. She would get up to 30 baboons together, put them in a cage, and create a troop artificially. And she did that with a series of age groups up to 3 years old. And when they were 3, or just past 3, she essentially, Jim, is Winston okay? She essentially would release them back into the wild, which was a very complicated legal procedure, again, where she had to get permits and fight the authorities. And the other amazing thing she did was she discovered that the cage troop could coexist with the wild troop. And so essentially you had baboons in cages and baboons running all over the place, mostly on top of the little room I lived in, and sleeping in the trees, and they were coexisting and even kind of mating occasionally through the cages. So I hope this is going to work, I don't know. Let me try. Okay. This is Rita at a release site after the baboon.
CARE, which is the Centre for Animal Rehabilitation and Education, was set up to care for orphaned and injured baboons in the Limpopo province of South Africa, which is
These
near
are the
Palabora.
caged baboons, as you can see.
Rita, who actually set up CARE and has lived there in what is now a game reserve all her life, has actually been coined the Jane Goodall of baboons. She's dedicated a lot of her life to looking after them. She knows a lot about them. She knows them all by name. It's
This
quite
is a
incredible.
river down there.
I ask, for instance, my volunteers, why do you come here? Why baboons? And you get the weirdest answers. It's just, why do you fall in love? Can you explain that? You don't even have any really wild areas anymore, because as humans, we're not prepared to share. And that's what we're trying to teach our volunteers on this place. You can share. If you go, for instance, and sit by the river, you've got the baboons, you've got the warthogs, you've got the elephants, and they don't bother each other. But come a human being, panic.
Farmers will shoot the mothers often, and then they find the baby clinging to the dead mother. Someone will either look after it for a while because they don't have the heart to kill the little baby, and then it ends up here.
They've got approximately 500 baboons at the sanctuary. They are looking after the baboons, caring for them day to day, getting them ready for the ultimate goal, which is to release them back into the wild.
Eventually these guys will all grow up to be a troop, and when they're about 6 years old, then they're ready to be released. And we release them into protected areas, game farms, people that want to reintroduce species that have been there before.
You know, there has never ever been a census taken. How many baboons have we got left? Nobody would give you a penny for that. Until the day after tomorrow, oh my God, we think there's no more baboons. Never happened, never happened.
CARE has some longer term plans for the baboons, and part of that is education centre, so that schools can go and visit, sort of see them in their natural environment, which would be amazing, very, very beneficial. And again, it's something that the Great Climate Handshake would love to try and get off the ground and support into the future.
I'm trying to see how to stop this, but I can't find the mouse. Oops. Well, let's see. Oh, I think that'll stop it. Okay, that'll just give you an idea of what the place looks like. There are caged baboons of all ages. There are the smalls, who are 3 months to 6 months. There are the mediums, who are 6 months to a year. And there's the large and the extra large. And it goes on to up to 6 years old. What happens with the volunteers, the baboons don't like men much. And bearded men they hate. You're out of it, Chuck. You can't go. No, they're very afraid of bearded men. And they prefer women. They fear men somewhat because you're sort of the alpha male coming in. And one of the things the volunteers had to do, and this was only the women, the man Jacob on the right was the one exception for about 2 weeks because the surrogate mother got sick. But the volunteers come in and they surrogate mother the baboons, which means that for 24 hours a day, including in the shower, on the toilet, and everywhere else, they live with a baboon tied around their waist. Because that's exactly how baboons live for the first 3 to 6 months. So these are, the baboon Rita's holding was injured in a fight. Its leg was almost torn off. The two amazing things about baboons I discovered is, A, they have remarkable eyesight. They have the most remarkable eyesight I've ever seen. They can see. I once put this on this little tape recorder up in the shower, and the baboons, within 2 seconds, were reaching through to grab it. They see unbelievably, and they also have, this would be a good study for a homeopath, they have the most remarkable healing powers imaginable. They look like they're about to die from wounds, and 2 weeks later, they're fine. So this is one of there are many little emergencies, including one day there was a call snake, and everybody ran up to one of the cages, and a baboon had been bitten by a black mamba. And when you're bitten by a black mamba, you essentially die by asphyxiation. The tongue turns purple, and it's really a horrible, unattractive death. So that happened. And so I was often in the cage with the mediums, the smalls, and I made a couple of very close friends, mainly Maggie and Dennis, who are brother and sister. What happens when you walk into the cage, which is a terrifying thing actually, you walk in and immediately baboons jump all over you because you're the alpha male, you're the biggest thing in the cage. And they jump all over you largely for protection. They're fighting it out, and they're sort of already trying to get rank order of who's going to be the dominant male and female. And so whenever they get into a fight and they think they're going to get hurt, they come to you. But one thing I didn't know about baboons, which I found out almost immediately, is if you move too quickly and they feel threatened, one of them lets out this high-pitched sort of squealing sound, which causes the others to immediately mob you, which means they all attack you at once and bite you. And though these little guys don't have terribly sharp teeth yet, they're sharp enough that it hurts. So I got mobbed within about 40 seconds when I pushed Dennis to the side or something. And that wasn't fun. So just to go, I tried to put as much law into this as possible. So Rita was up against the authorities too, and she actually had a very public trial in September of 2005 when she was charged with illegally transporting an injured baboon from one province in South Africa to another, or actually there's a province in Mozambique. And she used the Gandhi, the civil disobedience defense, you know. She said that she had done so. She pled guilty, but she claimed she had done so out of necessity. And she testified that on a previous occasion, a baboon she had tried to rescue had died because of similar delays in issuing the permits. And the court declared, quote, "The court is sure that what she, Rita, did was what an ordinary citizen in the circumstances would have done." The magistrate held her innocent and ruled that the park's permit policies were obstructionist to the welfare of baboon rehabilitation specialists like Rita. And so she won that case. Next time you teach civil disobedience, there you go. Okay, so what happens when you go to care, actually one thing they ask you to bring two things. What are those called? Nipples, if you can bring nipples, and diapers. They really need nipples and diapers. So I brought a lot of nipples and diapers. And as you can see, these are some of the smalls. They're very, 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 very cute, which large baboons are not so cute, which is why they're not so beloved. But small baboons are like small everythings, adorable. And you can see, I just wanted to show you some of the physical qualities of baboons. Like most primates, they have very good gripping hands with opposable thumbs, and they also have very substantial feet, as you can see here. And so they're very equipped for getting around, climbing trees, chasing prey, fleeing prey, stealing things. They're so smart that actually the people at CARE had to invent a new kind of lock that had never been used before because they could get into any other lock imaginable. So they invented this crazy lock that you lift and turn and goes, you know, even a human being, although baboons are smarter than we are, can't figure it out, just to make it baboon-proof. And they still get in sometimes. I can't talk about this without talking a little bit about lust. So this rather unattractive swelling, I have to admit, you have to be a baboon to be turned on by this. This is the turn on if you're a male baboon. I forget what that area is called. Do you know, it starts with a C, the collar something. I can't remember it. But anyway, it's essentially this very robust swelling of the anus and vagina and every area around it, which tells the male, and you'll notice the male has a longer snout. The males are different looking than the females, but not so much. And they're also larger. It tells them that the female is in estrus and that this is a good time to make babies. And so they mate. They mate in a very, very funny way, actually, which is that, as you can imagine, the male approaches from behind. He does his thing. He ejaculates. The female lets out a big yelp and then runs forward about 25 feet and stops. So it's a very funny little mating game that goes on. But the dominant males, the Chief Justices, have mating rights above anybody else. And if other males are very strategic in how they make friends in the troop, et cetera, they might get a chance too. But the dominant male gets sort of first pick. These are some of the local South Africans who, this shed on the left, I forgot her name. She was very, very sweet. It's called the Black Mamba Shed. And it's where you go and clean the shit and piss and other things off the blankets after the night, of which there's an awful lot. You spend a lot of time in these cages being sort of puked on and shat on and peed on. It's very dirty. You really have to get over it fairly quickly or you're going to die. So I took many, many, many showers. But that's the Black Mamba Shed because black mambas have been known to hide in it. But you had to go in there with the blankets and wash the blankets. So this is not the kind of thing you want to do too often in life, I think. So baboons love to groom each other, and I'm sure you've all seen this. They love to groom each other, and they love to groom you. And it's a sign of affection, and they'll groom anything they can reach, any hair, your chest, your hair, your ears. They could get into your underwear, your pubic hair, but you know, they will groom. And it's a very nice feeling, I have to admit. I can really see why it's a turn on. It's very lovely. And so Dennis did quite a lot of grooming of me. I think they liked my hair. They also will steal anything. They'll take your watch off, go into your pockets. They will take anything that can be extricated from you. And this is what Rita called her takeout window. And it was the window to her room, to her living room. And many of the baboons would come there during the day, the wild troop, hoping that she would reach a banana or an apple out. And so she called it the takeout window. And so this is Rita and Lee. That picture is actually taken by me on the left. And this is one of the baboons that Lee was in fact mothering. So she was tied to her for 24 hours a day. And it's a lot of work, you know, and you have to sleep with them and everything. And this is Bennett, the man with whom Rita started care. One of the interesting things sort of sociologically is just the relation that's going on between this elderly German refugee and these big black South African men, you know, who she bosses around and just, you know, couldn't care less what color they are or, you know, and they're all scared of her. Everybody was scared of her. I was scared of her too. And she was not scared of me. And this is two of the surrogate mothers. So you can see these are not infants. These are older baboons. These are young baboons who are away from being tied up to the mother. But they still, they bond with their mother for a long time. And so just as if it was their natural mother, they're very bonded to these two particular women. This woman on the left was named Kim Sobak, and she was actually a very rich person who had a lot of money. She had been a money manager, and she lived in, what's that country? It's an island, starts with an M. Where? No, not Madagascar. No, not Monaco. Anyway, she lived in some country that starts with an M. And she had a beautiful house, but she was obsessed with baboons, and she abandoned her money and her husband for about 6 months a year and went there and took care of cleaning shit out of blankets of baboons, you know. So there were interesting people there. And this is a baboon family. They're very adorable. You can see that in this particular case, it seems to be the mother who's there with an older sibling. I think that's the mother. I think that's a female. And the baboon is sort of nestled in. They spend about the first 3 months under the mother, sort of just hugging her and attached that way. And then after about 3 to 6 months, they climb on the back, and I think I have. They love apples, and they will take anything that's out in the open. They often broke into Rita's house. One of them particularly, somehow she developed a soft spot for this one, and she allowed him into the freezer and for about 4 minutes, and he would go in the freezer and he would take everything out. But they love apples, you know. And this is, I call Baboon Uber, you know, Uber the taxi company, because you can see that after the first few months, and this one has quite the little thing there, you can see, he's already getting mature. They ride on the mother's back, and that's how they get around for several months. In the morning, this is Zen and the art of baboon maintenance. In the morning, when the sun came out over the river, I thought this was really wonderful, actually. I like to do this myself. They would just sit in a family in the sun and just very, very peacefully. They're not always peaceful. They're not peaceful at all, actually, but very, very peacefully kind of meditate for about an hour. And I thought this was my favorite thing, actually. And they compete for you in the cages. We would sit in the cage. You sit on a milk carton in the cage, on a plastic milk carton. It's very claustrophobic. The cage is very low. You're being shat on and pissed on and bombarded by baboons. It's very uncomfortable. And they keep coming to you for protection, and sometimes they compete for your chest hairs. Jim, is he okay? Yeah, sure. Okay. And these are Rita and some friends. She and I developed this remarkable friendship, and we just kind of hit it off. I think, you know, I satisfied her guilt about having been a Nazi, and she satisfied my curiosity about the Nazis, or whatever. And of course, she was a young child when this happened, so she was not a Nazi anymore. And this is a mother and child. You see a lot of this. The baboons, the wild baboons, are a little bit intimidating. They have extremely sharp teeth and scary-looking teeth. And they use it really for protection against predators. They don't attack people, but there are a couple of basic rules you observe. You don't look the males in the eye, which is kind of considered a challenge. And if you really value your health, you walk around with a rock in your hand, because they're very scared of stones and they can see everything. So if they see you have a stone, but you basically don't bother them, especially if they're copulating. They don't like to be bothered in the middle of copulation, so you kind of stay away. But in my whole time, there were no incidents. There was one incident where a male pushed one of the volunteers. They'll do that sometimes, but they, despite the horrible looking teeth, they don't attack you. And they spend a lot of time with their bottles. You spend a lot of time making formula and feeding them and cleaning the cages. It's not clean work. And this was a girl from Holland that the baboon seemed particularly fond of, and I can understand why. She was very pretty. I assume these were male baboons. I don't know. Maybe not. But they really took she had a way with the baboons that nobody else had. And you can see these are the baboons, the uncaged baboons, and they're all over the place, and they're all sizes and all ages. And one of the things baboons like very much are babies. If a baboon has a baby, everybody wants to touch the baby and even steal the baby. And in the worst case, the male baboons will kill the babies, because once the child is dead, once the baby is dead, the woman goes out of estrus, and stops producing milk, and she's ready to mate again. So if you're a male baboon who wants to reproduce, it's a very Darwinian world. If you're a male baboon, you want to reproduce, you kill the babies so that the women will be ripe again. And one thing you see very often, which is very touching, horrible, is many of, about 30% or so of the young infant baboons die right after birth. And when they die, the mother continues to carry around the dead infant for several days. It's very, very touching, you know, kind of as if to come back to life. And then after about 4 days, she kind of gives up. And there was a lot of that. You could see a lot of that. A lot of baboons got injured. You can see here they're applying a stent to this baboon's leg. This was in a fight with a larger baboon. There are a lot of injuries, and there was a vet on call often who came for all kinds of horrible things. That's the takeout window. Oh, yeah. So yeah, these are me and my friend. These are the larger baboons. These are now the sort of 6 months to a year old, and they're big and heavy, and they jump all over you, especially if you're carrying food. They don't hurt you, but they're big. This was a wonderful moment. I was reading a book, and sometimes if you forget, you get off guard and you do something and you forget how smart they are. And I was reading a book, and I put the book in the doorway to hold the door open, and within 4 seconds, this baboon took my book, went up to the roof, and you can see on the right-hand slide, seems to be reading it here. But that was my book, which I never saw again. It was a good book, too, but anyway. They're often scared, and so when they're scared, they come to you for protection. And they're very sly in the way they come to you, because then when whoever's attacking them turns back, they go and get that person. And this is them again in the morning. These are some tracks along the Limpopo River. Those are crocodile tracks, you can see. And there were a lot of crocodiles in the river. And every night, every evening, the baboons are brought in, the smalls and the mediums are brought in from the cages, and they sleep in Rita's house with their toys. They all have little dolls and all kinds of little, just like children. These are baboons being transported to a release center. But you can see this is sort of how it looks. It's very wild looking, and there are cages all around. And these are some of the South African guys who worked for Rita doing all kinds of manual work around the place. This was Tripsy, who was the oldest baboon. And this is a quote from Rita where she says, "Poor old Tripsy did not come to my notice for a long time. She was just another female in the long tit troop. She named them long tits. I spotted her when checking the troop on the return to our farm. There was Tripsy, totally brutalized and smashed to pieces, her left arm broken in 2 places, dragging herself along, bent over with pain. So Rita started to feed her, and every morning at about 9 o'clock, she would take an egg. You can see Tripsy with the egg here. She would take an egg and some milk and bananas, and she would get her own special treatment. And she died about 3 months after I left. But she was very, very lame and could barely walk. She was really not in good shape. But Rita just loved animals. She would even at night go down to feed the hyenas scraps, you know, anything but humans. You can see the interaction between in and out, baboons in the cages and the wild troop. And there's a lot of interaction. And the cage troop is sort of picking up things from the wild troop about how to live in a way. So I'm almost at the end here. I last spoke to Rita on the 25th of July, 2012. And I had trouble reaching her. It was very hard to get through to the phones there. And I finally reached her after several weeks of trying. We were because the German edition of the book was about to come out. We had something to talk about. And so it was about 4 in the afternoon on a Thursday. And we talked on the phone, and we had a very nice conversation. And that was Thursday afternoon. And Saturday morning, I went to check my email, and there was a message. The subject line was Rita Miljo, and the message said, Michael, my name is Matt Schudel, and I'm a reporter at the Washington Post. We have learned that Rita Miljo, the subject of your story in the Post magazine, has died in a fire in South Africa. I'm preparing an obituary. Do you know if there might be any photos? So on that Friday night, about 24 hours after I spoke to her, the volunteers were eating dinner, and they suddenly saw the sky turn red, and Rita's place was on fire. And she and Bobby perished in that fire. This was the article from the New York Times, and that's a picture I took of her. I'll just show you a couple of little, oh, this is, by the way, Nelson Mandela came to CARE. Nelson Mandela was one of the few human beings Rita liked. She liked Nelson Mandela. She said he was a good man. He came to visit after he was president. This is the release site where the baboons are released, and then somebody stays with them for weeks and weeks and weeks and makes sure they know how to get food and that they're acclimated and et cetera, et cetera. It's a very complicated procedure. And this, whoops. I think I'm supposed to do something. Oh, yeah.
To preserve life is always worth it. Whether it's a baboon, whether it's a person, whether it is a worm for that matter. They're all for a purpose here. So who are we to take it upon ourselves to decide who can live and who can't live?
Rita Miljo loved all animals, but she had a special place in her heart for baboons.
Okay, so
More
she's
specific.
saying, you know, everybody has a right to live. Who are we to take it upon ourselves to decide? This you can see, this is the baboon she led into the house, and he's in the freezer on the right. They also have these big cheeks where they can store stuff, and both these guys have food in their cheeks. This is bedtime, where we all take the small baboons, grab as many of them as you can grab, and took them into the house. And when the fire broke out, the volunteers ran down there and rescued most of the little baboons. Most, but not all. But they sleep in Rita's kitchen with their toys and in these big cages. And I won't, this is the fire itself, just so you can see what happened. You can see this is the house I showed you of Rita's room. I can't make this thing go. That's the fire, and that's how it looked. That was my room in the front. That's how it looked when the fire was over. And you can see the fire just decimated the place, and only 5 baboons from the clinic survived, and this was one. You can see how burnt he is in the nose and stuff. And this is Rita's funeral on July 30th. All kinds of people came. You know, she was not always beloved. A lot of people hated her. She actually claimed that the only reason she wasn't in jail for murder was that she was a bad shot, that she had tried to shoot several people who had come onto the property, and I believe it. She was buried with Bobby the baboon, the first baboon, and buried up on the hill where all the baboons are buried, and she knew every marker which baboon was in there. And I'll just show you, this is just, and I'll end with this. I was going to read something from the book, but just one other thing about the book. The book is in 3 parts. The first part is a longer version of the articles I published in Natural History and Washington Post just about my experience there. The second part are Rita's journals of 30 years that I spent about 2 years editing. And it describes her childhood and her coming to South Africa and all kinds of things. And every night, I made a deal with Rita that every night at about 8 o'clock, I would knock on her door with this little speaker thing. You might even, let's see.
Tell me, if you had to say what the thing you think you learned the most from baboons was, what would you say it would be?
I learned how people take
Can you hear that?
Learn
Not very
why
well.
people behave like they do.
I asked her what was the main thing she learned from baboons. I would go in every night, and I would make a subject that we would talk about, which she hated because, like, sometimes I said, like, love and sex. And she said, oh, Michael, must we? But I would have a subject every night, and I would go in and we would drink some white wine and listen to Beethoven, and I would interview her. So I had this enormous thing of interviews, and the third part of the book is a sort of digest of those interviews, because she had amazing things to say about all kinds of things, some of which I liked, some of which I didn't, and some of which I even found kind of offensive. I will read you one little thing that she says about Hitler in her section. My father soon again got a government job, and then there was a question of finding a school for me. This is back in Germany. This wasn't so easy since most school buildings had been bombed out. However, some 10 kilometers from where we lived, one of the most reputable girls' high schools, the Klosterschule, opened up once more. Their building was damaged, no windows, no doors, some shaky walls. But nonetheless, we had a building that eventually housed 3 schools, working in 3 shifts. Admission was through a selection process, which I succeeded in passing. It was one of the happiest days of my life when I could go back to school, whether it was starting out on foot to walk the 10 kilometers at 4:30 in the morning, a lonely and spooky walk through endless dead streets lined by burned and bombed out buildings, or going late at night for the last shift. This was the most profound soul and mind-shaping period of my life. I can only say that I owe my whole being to the teachers I had. Imagine where I had come from, born into and raised in the Third Reich, all my values shaped by Hitler, and Hitler alone. Our parents had to shut up or were too scared to talk to their children. Then came the end of the war, the total collapse of everything I had believed in. Now, in returning to school, a new world opened up for me. I discovered that there was Shakespeare, for instance, and every bit of knowledge and intellect Hitler had withheld from me as soon as it became known that its origin was Jewish, now opened into my horizon. It was simply overwhelming. We talked a lot about the Nazis, actually, and she said that one thing she really liked about being a Nazi was she liked competition. She liked the sense that winning was important, and she was very open about that. So she had some remarkable experiences, and I think that's it. I'm going to stop there. You know, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer, but I think that's enough.